and welcome to our session on litigation in times of a pandemic, challenging laws, and thinking self-care. Today is International Human Rights Day. I'm sure most of you have been recalling this day, which has been observed every year on the 10th of December, the day the United Nations General Assembly adopted in 1948 the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Of course, I'm sure that we are all aware that this year's theme is equality, reducing inequalities and advancing human rights. My name is Veronica Cenac. I am an attorney at law. I practice in the Caribbean, principally in St. Lucia, and I will be your moderator for today's session. We have about 45 minutes. The session, the panelists are a combination of litigants in cases that we have ongoing in the Caribbean and attorneys at law and constitutional law experts. I will start with a brief introduction about the background of this panel. I will ask each panelist to introduce themselves just for about 1 minute. And then we will have a discussion. I will be asking questions of the panelists. And I invite the attendees to also put your questions in the Q&A section. We will take in round 2 of the session. Our first session will be a discussion between the panelists and myself. And then we can take, if we have additional questions, we'll take it in round 2, which would be about 20 minutes into the session. So it was Eleanor Roosevelt who encapsulated the concept of advancing human rights when she said a very, very often quoted quote, "Where after all do human rights begin? In small spaces, close to home, so close and so small that they cannot be seen on any maps of the world. Unless these rights have meaning there, they have little meaning anywhere. Without concerted citizen action to uphold them close to home, we shall look in vain for progress in the larger world." In our small spaces in the Caribbean region, in countries so small that they can truly barely be seen on the map, 9 countries in the English-speaking Caribbean continue to criminalize same-sex sexual acts with up to life imprisonment. In most cases, it's up to 10 years imprisonment. In nation after nation, courts have a history of being the ultimate battleground in the fight to uphold and reaffirm the rights held by LGBTQ+ persons. This concerted citizen action through litigation has resulted in 2 successful challenges in this region, resulting in the repeal of the Buggery laws in Belize and Trinidad and Tobago, in Orozco and the Attorney General of Belize, and Jones and the Attorney General of Trinidad and Tobago, respectively. Litigation, therefore, is a key strategy for reducing inequality and advancing human rights. The Eastern Caribbean Alliance for Diversity and Equality, ECADE, is currently challenging the Buggery and gross indecency laws in 4 countries in the region. Like all other aspects of our life, the COVID-19 pandemic has had an unanticipated, often negative impact on ongoing litigation. What lessons have we learned from the ways in which these shocks have been and are being experienced, and the specific challenges and opportunities that have emerged? How should we factor in the occurrence of disruptions such as pandemics in the current and future litigation-related action? This panel will explore the multidimensional facets of what successful litigation should look like, with concern for people, processes, and outcomes, particularly in unexpected crises. And this is the background for our panel today. I will invite the panelists to introduce themselves, starting with Judge Westmin James.
Hi, good day, everyone, and welcome. And it's a pleasure to be here today. So as Veronica has indicated, my name is Westmin James. I am a lawyer, judge, an advocate in the Caribbean. While born in Trinidad and Tobago, I'm a lecturer at the University of West Indies, the Cavill campus in Barbados, where I teach constitutional law, Commonwealth Caribbean human rights, international human rights, and employment law. I have been a lawyer for 15, 16 years now, in Trinidad, in Barbados, and in Belize. I was also the counsel in the Caleb Orozco case versus the Attorney General of Belize, which started a number of these pieces of litigation. And I work with the University of the West Indies Rights Advocacy Project. And in that capacity, I'm assisting in relation to the litigation carried out by ECADE throughout the Caribbean. I was also a judge of the Supreme Court in Belize for a year, and I'm a judge of 2 international tribunals. So my background is human rights and constitutional law.
As I said, constitutional law experts, and Westmin is one of the leading ones in the Caribbean today. I will now invite Tynetta McCoy.
Hi, good afternoon. And I'm Tynetta McCoy from St. Kitts and Nevis. I'm an activist within the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, and I'm also the executive director of SKN Alliance, which is a LGBTIQ firm.
Thank you, Tynetta. Raven, Gill. Raven, you muted.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, Veronica. Hi, everyone. My name is Raven Gill. I am a trans activist and advocate in Barbados. I am the founder of Butterfly Trans Barbados. That is the only trans Latin-focused civil society organization in Barbados. And passionate about mental health, laws and legislative reform, and being a beacon of visibility for the trans community in Barbados, and working with ECADE as well on the visibility of trans and non-binary persons in the Caribbean.
Thank you, Raven. Zita, Barnwell. Sorry.
Yes, thank you, Veronica. Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, my name is Zita Barnwell. Actually, Zita is a pet name that I've used throughout, but my formal registered name is actually Sherlyn, but I just simply prefer to be called Zita. I am an attorney at law in St. Vincent the Grenadines. I practice widely, but mostly on civil matters and public law matters. 7th of December, a few days ago, was my 9th anniversary of having been called to the bar of St. Vincent the Grenadines. I am a former senator for the opposition party in St. Vincent the Grenadines, having served between 2015 actually, and 2019. And when I was a senator, I shadowed the Ministry of Mobilization of People with Disabilities, Women, Youth, and National Mobilization. I do advocacy on a lot of matters, mostly representing people who are vulnerable, the elderly, children, the LGBTQI community. And I have recently taken, which is quite interesting, criminal matters. So I am now one of the attorneys who are assigned, well, we don't really have capital murder anymore in St. Vincent, but capital cases, but the only set of cases that the government provides legal aid. And so that's all the area of work that I do currently.
Thank you so much, Zita.
Thank you.
And we have Ms. Alexandrina Wong, who is...
Hello everyone. I'm Alexandrina Wong, a nurse midwife by profession. We're currently working in the NGO sphere with emphasis on gender-based violence, human development, and human capital. My organization, Women Against Rape, is over a decade old, and we have been serving populations in Antigua and Barbuda and out the region. My organization, along with another organization, have challenged the Constitution regarding the sexual offenses law. We have had a first meeting in court, and we are eagerly awaiting the follow-up discussions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, panelists. As I promised, we have a very knowledgeable and active experts and persons who can contribute quite a bit to this discussion and any questions that the attendees to these sessions will have. So I'm going to start the first round of questions with the constitutional expert on our panel, which is Judge Westmin James. And my question to you is, why strategic litigation in the Caribbean? We have, other than the death penalty cases, we have, this is in terms of addressing the buggery law, one of the the more recent, or at least the next stage of strategic litigation in the Caribbean, and why is it this is important at this time?
Thank you very much, Veronica. So first of all, we should indicate to the listeners, like, and explain certainly what is strategic litigation. So, so when we speak of strategic litigation, we're talking about a method that we can bring about significant changes in the law, in practice, or public awareness by taking carefully selected cases to court. And that's really what we are doing, which is strategic litigation. Usually the clients involved in strategic litigation have been victims of either human rights abuses and or other types of infringements. And so they are suffered by many others. And so it is important to bring awareness and bring this issue to court sometimes to get the resolution to it. It's a strength, not a weakness, certainly. Strategic litigation has been invaluable in human rights litigation, as it requires carefully evaluation and planning. And as an indicated by Veronica, it is not unknown to the region. In fact, the region has been using strategic litigation since independence of our countries. And Veronica certainly highlighted death penalty cases. There are a number of religious rights cases that occurred in the region, such as from Trinidad and Tobago in relation to the highest award, which was called Trinity Cross, but did not actually work well with multicultural and religious societies such as Trinidad and Tobago. And we saw a case starting off the strategic litigation was Hinds and the Queen, which is a very long worked, constitutional law case that every student in constitutional law has to read. They try to not to. So it has been used for a long time. And it requires a person and lawyers and rights advocates to look at what is their legitimate human rights concern. Is it a real good legal case? Where and why you wish to litigate it? And what are the range of understandings of these human rights issues among the group? And you have to ask your question whether or not it will do additional harm to the group that you are thinking you are trying to protect. This certainly is also, value in strategic litigation. It can be initiated really and led by those most affected, and thus more it responds to the needs of the vulnerable minorities. It can focus the discussion on specific moral, social, and legal questions, and it provides a justification for change that is grounded in the highest law, which is the Constitution. It generates fewer political costs for politicians, and so therefore they like that, so that they can support change, but rather than actually legislating it and facing the possible consequences. And it can have a positive impact on the law in other countries, and not just that one. I think my time is up, but I certainly would just say that there are lessons to learn in strategic litigation that you need to look at. It can be demoralizing because of delay sometimes in litigation. You have to be aware of possible political and social backlash for what a case might be. And sometimes state officials use litigation that is going on as an excuse to do nothing, right? Even though they can still do stuff. And while there may be safety and security concerns and standing rules and support of the community who it is trying to help, but when it sometimes it's person is seen as the face and not rather the community for who it is. So this is just a little bit about strategic litigation and why it is important.
Thank you, Westmin, and that was very well covered. I want to focus on from the personal perspective, from the person as opposed to the community, and ask Tynetta the next question. Why did you, what has triggered your involvement in the organization in St. Kitts and Nevis? How has that impacted your family? And as a litigant in the case in St. Kitts, what has been how has it been for you? Westmin just spoke about the distinction between who becomes the face of the challenge as opposed to the community. How have you been able to navigate that?
All right, well, for me personally, I would say what get me involved is, individuals within the LGBT community here in St. Kitts and also being a victim myself as a young female growing up. So I felt that there was a need to unite with each other and, carry the movement, especially for our voices to be heard. So that's what basically gave me the drive to get involved. How has it affect me when it comes to family? It's basically a negative and a positive impact, but currently it's more positive. As I mean, the negative issues with some family members are Bible oriented, but at the end of the day, I still have a strong family support that support me in what that I believe in and what I'm trying to achieve. As it comes to the case and the face and how it is to, sometimes it's a bit rough part, but at the end of the day, I would love to say, I have a strong support system behind me. So I think that itself helps to, push my face there more as not of the community, because I think there's still a need for, more awareness and education within the community before we can actually say, hey, we're going to push the community as, the face.
Okay. And thank you so much, Tynetta. And you, Raven, how has the case or the news around the case been perceived by the trans community in Barbados?
So you're talking about the case that we're pursuing?
Yes.
Right. So that actually has not been widely publicized. So there's not much people that know of it in the trans community specifically. The few persons that would have followed up to know that it's happening is just anxious to find out the outcome or what was happening, which we all were also waiting to know what was happening. And then with the recent change of Barbados becoming a republic, what that process may be like and how it would possibly impact the case. But particularly, we're still waiting to see, and the committee members that do have an active interest in it are just sitting down on their hands like the rest of the litigants.
Do you think that it helps the situation by not making the case too public?
I do, because from other cases in the Caribbean, we've seen the faith-based organizations really lash out at the community. And we've not had the expanse of that per se, because even when the magistrate, the judge, that person was trying to give time for the news to spread so that the faith-based organizations could get a hold of it and be up in arms with their pitchforks, their hypothetical pitchforks. It didn't happen the way that the judge was hoping. So I think it's good that it's not been widely publicized and there's not been a huge lot of coverage on it specifically, because then media training would have to happen, and then safety around mobilizing the litigants if it was known who they were specifically. So I think it's really good that there's been little to no big noise around the case.
Okay, thank you so much, Raven. And Alexandrina, you are leading an organization, Women Against Rape. How does the construct of gender and harmful practices relate to the LGBT movement, which encouraged you to become your organization to also be a litigant in this case?
Thank you for asking that, Veronica. At the time when Women Against Rape was launched, there was no other organization offering gender-sensitive care. We started out by offering services to women and families affected by gender-based violence. We are all aware that violence does not happen in a vacuum. And so we expanded our services from a national perspective through public education, awareness, and training. And we found that members of the LGBTQI population were very much in need of psychosocial support. They were also in need of access to healthcare and access to justice. And so on that level, we became intricately involved because we now offer various forms of services, including psychosocial support to individuals individuals of the LGBTQI populations, we have to be very, very cognizant of the social harm that is caused by verbal and other types of violence to vulnerable populations, but more especially the LGBTQI, because Antigua is known to be a Christian society, as it were. Strangely enough, though, although we have presented our documents in the High Court, we have not heard any rumors. We have not seen any reports from the faith-based organizations. So we are very pleased at this stage, the way the litigation process is proceeding. And we, as an organization, we stand firmly behind members of the LGBTQI populations, some of whom are within our group and within our leadership as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you, Alexandrina. So you also of the view that having, whilst the process is ongoing, that ensuring that the focus is on the litigation as opposed to the public engagement through media and press conferences and whatnot has actually helped the process for you in Antigua.
Yes, it certainly has, and we have been in close contact with our legal persons and the other individual whose name is on the document that we are taking this process forward.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So Zita, you are one of the lawyers who is currently engaged, like some of us, in the conduct of these challenges. Take us inside of the situation in St. Vincent, which is, I'm sure, exceedingly stressful. We have the pandemic, we have the eruption of the Sucre volcano, and we have all these other issues that have happened. What has been the impact on the case and the process in St. Vincent?
Yes, thank you. So yes, I am one of two attorneys in St. Vincent the Grenadines filed a claim against the state, challenging the sections of the criminal code, which are the burglary laws in St. Vincent the Grenadines. And yes, I mean, stress, I think I would describe it as a time filled of great anxiety. At the time, so by March last year, 2020, it would have made 7 months after we had filed our application. And what had happened in this short period would have been the most challenging aspect where the churches in St. Vincent had applied to have themselves added as a party. We'd gone past that. And by March 2020, we were in the court fighting to have ourselves, to make applications for export, because our first application for technical issues, the judge had actually rejected our application. So, and at that same time, I was actually planning or making a trip abroad. My son lived I brought him back home last year, but he lived in Toronto last year. So at the same time, I'm traveling, at the same time, I'm trying to deal with the court matters, and was stuck in Toronto for 4 months while I'm trying to do this from afar, obviously because of the pandemic. And the partner in office was, in a way, having to make certain adjustments himself. We had to hire an additional person on staff, even if it was a time of the pandemic. But luckily for St. Vincent at the time, it wasn't so much of a great time that people were so concerned. We were lucky at the first go that the international airport kind of just shut down, simply because planes weren't coming. So there wasn't that type of, we weren't affected immediately with respect to people may have come in with respect to the coronavirus. And of course, we were struck with later on with the Sucre this year. We had dengue. It has been a really serious time of trying to go through everything. Luckily, I must say before I end, is that what made it easy though, is that by March of last year, the civil court, the High Court, almost immediately went online via Zoom. So that eased some of the tensions. The other courts were simply just shut down. So it was a bit easier to get through getting things done. So the Court of Appeal, we were able to get our appeal done through Zoom. That was not any great delay, but I must say up to this point in time, it's 2 years going on 3 years. We have just had a hearing last 2 weeks ago, and the High Court has actually spread this matter over to 2023, where January seems to be the date for the trial. Believe it or not.
And Westmin did talk about the long process that can go on. And Belize was 3 years after full argument in the case for the decision. So far, we've had other cases go a little bit more rapidly, but that's quite long for St. Vincent and the Grenadines, 2023. So I want to focus now a little bit more specifically for the panel on some of the issues around the pandemic and how do you think it has impacted and what are your expectations about the case. So I'll go back to Tynetta. What does what do you think? How have you not had any hearings in St. Kitts and Nevis? There's one due soon. It'll be the first. How do you think? What are your expectations from that? So far it's been quiet. We'll see what happens. And what is self-care to you in respect of all of the issues that the LGBT community face in your country? How do you practice self-care?
All right, well, for me, I mean, going into the first hearing, as you mentioned, that currently is quite quiet. So I'm hoping and I'm wishing that I continue to stay on that path. And I'm hoping that all goes well, especially with the lies that I hope that it go against, so it's in our favor, especially for the basic human rights of the LGBT aspect in that context. What self-care is for me currently is more about continue taking steps to ensure that I'm healthy mentally and physically, especially emotionally. But in a sense, on the ground, even though it may seem quiet, there are still conversations that are being going around at this point. But as I said, the conversation basically at this point is more positive than negative. So I'm just hoping that that's stay on that pathway going forward. I think it's gonna be quite simple for me to just continue, staying healthy. That's the most important thing for me, to just continue staying healthy during the time frame.
So just a little side question. Have you had to do any other, has this case sort of propelled the recognition of your organization? And have you seen any partners? Have you been able to forge any partnerships with other entities in the country based on the case?
Well, in country, since we launched a case and we had conversation around it, well, we from an organization standpoint had an opportunity to have the community coming, where we have a lawyer coming to educate them about the law in St. Kitts and Nevis. And we also use the opportunity as well to partner with the Disability Association and the Women's Association. And they're all on the same part with us and they work very closely with us. So, for 2022, we're going to try to continue that, because also, even though the case is going on, we still have to make the community aware and make them prepare just in the event.
Right. So you're doing a lot of work behind the scenes, not just the litigation, but behind the scenes into preparing the community for whatever is the outcome of the case.
Yes, definitely.
All right. Thank you. And Raven, sort of a similar question. What does self-care look like to you? And how has Butterfly been able to either reposition itself? What do you think are going to be the concerns based on the outcome? What are the activities that you're engaging in Barbados to address some of that in and around, and also taking into account the impact of the pandemic?
So self-care for me, I'm very, very girly at heart. So I like wigs. So my first profession was doing hair. So it's like I have brand new wig, and then I have another wig. So yes, that's my personal thing, shopping for the most part. But for the community, the pandemic has been really stressful in terms of sustaining their lives. So we've had to look for grants to provide care packages, pay for rent, that kind of stuff. So it's been stressful being called in the middle of the night. Luckily for the lockdown period, I had a pass to operate outside within the lockdown period. So the curfew, I had a pass to operate. So I would have to leave home at times and go take somebody from being evicted by the landlord, that kind of stuff. So it's been very traumatic. And we've, again, through the grant that we've had to provide the care packages, we've also made a provision for mental health care. It's like a therapist, a counselor, somebody to talk to them so that it helps them navigate the process of going through the pandemic and all that's associated with it, because we had no idea this was coming and that it would be this detrimental. So going forward, we are going to try to work more mental health things into all of the activities that we're doing. Online is great, but it's not for everybody. And when I say that, is that everybody doesn't have access to a tablet or a laptop, smartphones, constant Wi-Fi, an apartment or a house. So hoping that the restrictions still let us operate within a physical space at my house, at other safe spaces where we can have small gatherings and share and just be with it within the confines of everything that's going on. But still remember that community is community, and we still need to do whatever we can. Activists, advocate, just a person, to your sister or brother, to help them get through this and not feel like they're trapped and alone. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, what are the kinds of things that you and the other organizations have been doing to ensure that that you're reaching out to them, for those who are alone, not just you in the past, but what are the types of activities, what are the kind of grants you've been looking for to do that?
So Outright, actually, we got the grant from Outright to provide food stuff and care packages and mental health stuff. So with that, we have hosted a few online chats on Zoom, and then when we have the chance, meet up at a particular space and just sit, talk, whatever the case may be. But honestly, they just want to sit and talk and not be fearful of somebody wanting to assault them because they're trans and visible, or just having somebody to talk to about things like hormones and clothes that fit and where that they can find a job, because finding jobs is almost impossible outside of survival sex work. And the survival sex work thing has been widely publicized as the only way that you can survive as a trans person, but some of them have other skills, cosmetology, garment making. So it's just finding a way to connect non-LGBT persons with the trans community so that they can do their craft and survive otherwise. I think it's interesting that people often ask, what can we do as community members? And it's very simple. Just be kind.
Thank you very, very, very much. Thank you, Raven. That's a powerful statement and a very true statement. Alexandrina, the situation in Antigua, I know some of the work that War does, but how do you expect, what are your expectations of the case? And how do you expect it is going to be successful, unsuccessful? And in the event that perhaps it is unsuccessful, what are the kinds of things that you are doing now to plan for that?
Okay, thanks. I'll start with the last question first. Fortunately, we received some funds earlier up in the year, focusing on advocacy. And we used the opportunity to strengthen and also to bring in new community-based advocates and focus on gender-sensitive care. So we have that strong support there should the case go either way. Looking at the response that we have received so far, I do not see any adverse comments in any of our media. I know on that first instance when we were in court virtually, I attended virtually. There was an after meeting with our representative and a representative from the office of the DPP. For those of you who are in law, you would know that that's one of the stages in a litigation where within 14 days, certain dates are supposed to be set, failing which the court can set a date. But I have not gotten that feedback as to when the next session will be. My family, my main supporter, our community base is very, very strong. During COVID, there were focal points in all of the parishes who were able to reach out for us, both for women and girls and for members of the LGBT, so that we could have come together and get food packages and shelter for persons who were desperately in need. What we found also that because of the level of, I would say, joblessness, contractual sex kind of skyrocketed both in the male and in the female. So we had received some PPE, including masks and condoms from one of our regional partners in December. And so we were able to distribute those commodities along with information packages to members of the vulnerable groups. Now that we have had some of the restrictions removed, we can communicate face-to-face in numbers of not more than 20 or 25. And so our advocacy continues through training and sensitization, building up that level of emotional intelligence, emotional consciousness of what we are dealing with, so that when the time should come, that some persons are more prepared psychologically than others. And we are hoping, because we have seen interest also from sectors of the legal body within Antigua and Barbuda. We were reliably informed that currently at our High Court, there is a request for a marriage between two males. We know that most of our laws in the Caribbean, the Anglophone Caribbean, that is, are fashioned the same way. And our marriage laws under Article 24 says marriage is a union between a person and a person. And so, truthfully speaking, we have a lot of information there to support our litigation process. And we continue to seek ways and means to support the LGBTQI community, because there are persons in the community who would call and ask us, do you have someone who need employment X, employment Y? So we can go to the names and the list that we have and be able to refer persons as necessary.
Thank you so much, Alexandrina. Well, originally, I don't think, I'm sure Westmin, perhaps certainly myself, was not aware of the filing in Antigua for the application for marriage. That would be a very interesting case alongside the current challenge that is going on, and perhaps we might want to look at that again. Westmin, I would just like to ask you, and then I'll come back to you, Zita, about what are the takeaways for successful litigation in this process. I mean, the panelists have mentioned a few things, but in your view, what do you think? What do you think? We have not reached a final conclusion in any one of the cases in the Eastern Caribbean as yet. But so far, what do you think is working well, and what are our key takeaways?
Well, certainly, just to say where the cases are. So there's Barbados, St. Kitts and Nevis, Antigua and Barbuda, St. Lucia, in relation to the matter. In Barbados is the furthest along, and the case is waiting judgment, and that should be done. That was filed in January 2020. It was to be heard in 2020. However, the judge had been went up to the Court of Appeal, so therefore the hearing of the trial was in 2021, and so the judgment should be done within 6 months. The cases in Antigua, St. Kitts and St. Lucia have all been filed, and there's some dates in Antigua for next year for trial, and the others are still in case management. I think certainly for the collective, the successful nature of the cases would be the experience that we have had previously. We are well aware of what are the legal arguments. The court has a rich jurisprudence now, even from the Caribbean to go by, and we have a better understanding of how to deal with all of the challenges that are going to come along with it. And so we also, learned a lot from the previous cases that we have been involved in about how to, with clients, and how, to explain to them the process of possibly delays and what that what comes along with that. So I think that is going to be helpful. Our highest court in the region, the CCJ, have already made certain pronouncements that will be very, was certainly binding in Barbados, and be influential for the rest of the Caribbean about these issues. So I think those will be the great thing, is just to hold the course.
Mm-hmm. And Zita, what is the state of the case in St. Kitts? I'm sorry, in St. Vincent.
Yeah, like I said before, we filed July 2019. So I'm really excited and happy to hear that Barbados is so far along. We are still lagging. I think we were probably the first to file. Well, in this round. And our last hearing, as I said, was recently, about 2 weeks ago. And Vinci Chap in St. Vincent and the Grenadines just applied to be an interested party, and there was no opposition by the state, no opposition by the churches, and obviously they're a friend to us, so we did not oppose. And so they have been officially joined, and there have been fresh directions. I can't say though that it is because Vinci Chap has joined why this thing is being protracted even more into December 2022, January 2023 as the window for a trial, the trial window date. Because when Vinci Chap made the application to join, they basically said, listen, we'd like to join, but we'd just like to have just short written submissions. However, the judge thought, well, to be fair, I'm opening up to them. They can file evidence if they wish to. So deadlines and dates have been given, directions has been given for them to file affidavits, for us to solve all the documents on them. And it has just been spread out next year over long periods. And so we're just going along. I'm not sure why that is. I mean, we have our own suspicions, but it is what it is for now. But we are moving slowly but surely along. So unlike probably Barbados, I think, I'm not sure, I think Westmin said that the CCJ is the final court. So for us, we move up to the Court of Appeal. If we lose, we hope not, but we know how it is. We feel that the churches are likely. We have heard rumors that the state said they won't appeal if they lose, but certainly we may expect the churches to want to appeal it. And if we do not prevail at the Court of Appeal, hopefully there'll be some funding available for us to carry this way all the way to the Privy Council.
Okay.
And that's if we do not win all the way up.
Thank you, Zita. I should inform the attendees that the number of cases that we mentioned, we have 5 countries: Barbados, St. Lucia, Antigua, and Barbuda, St. Kitts and Nevis, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. There's also a case in Dominica that has been filed, I think prior to the case just after the case in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And that matter is also in sort of its case management phase, and it's taking a long time. We have just 5 minutes left on the panel, and I don't see any questions in the question and answer session. So I'd like to give each panelist 1 minute to close out the session. I just want to highlight, I may not have the time, that certainly we can see time is an issue in our Caribbean courts. That's not, we can't assume that things are going to move very quickly. It's not ever the case. Barbados, I think, is an exception. Secondly, that the question of being careful about how the messaging around the cases, involving being too public about the cases has helped so far. And the pandemic, from a litigant standpoint, I think you are all joining on Zoom. So there's no opportunity for media, and there's the whole issue of walking into the courts. That has certainly mitigated the exposure of the litigants in these cases. That's what I'm picking up from the panelists so far. So I'd like to give everyone 1 minute for your closing remarks. I will start with Raven.
Right. So this has been very enlightening because I didn't know about the sort of a stalemate happening with St. Vincent, because that is really long. And I do know as a litigant in the case that ours seem to be kind of long, but we know from Belize and the other cases that is definitely not as long as how theirs went. I think it's good that we still have and then Dominica filing as well. So the Caribbean seems to be progressing towards a place of more open and accepting of the LGBT community, which I think is also good, because then we can focus on other things that are more pressing, like climate change. So yeah, that's it for me. Thank you, and I'm happy to see my other panelists. Hope to see you again very soon in person. Fingers crossed.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
Alexandrina.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. I would like to say it's very instrumental that we're having this discussion on Human Rights Day, because we all have been able to recognize the discriminatory attitude and actions which violate every human right we can think about that the LGBTQI community has suffered through the years. I am pleased and honored that my organization is a part of this process. I commend Outright for the work that they are doing, and ECADE as well. I commend all of my partners, not only the panelists here today, but all of us who are working to see that this injustice of decades is corrected. So I wish everyone a reflective Human Rights Day.
Thank you. Tynetta?
All right, well, for me, I'm going to be short. I basically share the same sentiment of the other panelists. But for me, I just want us to continue working as a network and continue to stay grounded.
In your usual way, precise. Thank you, Tiny. Zita, I left the lawyers to the last in case we didn't have time, so I could cut you off.
Well, I'm going to be very short. I just want to say I'm just so pleased and encouraged with this webinar. So the fact of the matter is, despite all that's happened in St. Vincent, the pandemic and all of those challenges, but by nature, that things have progressed along, and we continue to do what is necessary.
Thank you, Zita. I'm sorry, I have to say Zita. Westmin, you have the last word.
Certainly, I would like to thank everyone as well as the listeners for hearing us today. We are all in this together because the rights of one is also the rights of all. So if you allow one to go, trust me, it would be for everyone else as well. So it's I'm very happy to continue in the fight of human rights overall in the Caribbean, and we look forward to positive results in 2022.
Thank you. Thank you, Westmin. Thank you to the panelists. And